Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. Jagged teeth of shattered window pane bit into the soles of my feet as my hand, slick with sudden sweat, closed around the ashwood bat beside the bed. A frantic drumming pulsed in my ears, a frantic counterpoint to the alien cadence of footsteps violating the sanctity of my home. In that fractured instant, the predictable rhythm of my suburban existence splintered into something sharp, something terrifying. My name is Elias Thorne. Until that night, fortune seemed a constant, quiet companion. 35 years had brought a dependable career, this house nestled in its drowsy lane, a life mapped out in reassuringly straight lines. Now, engulfed by darkness, clutching that crude length of wood, the illusion of safety evaporated like mist. It was Wednesday, deep into the small hours past 2. Exhaustion from a day ground out at the office had pulled me under early. A violent percussion of breaking glass ripped me back to consciousness, my mind struggling to assemble the sound into meaning. Then the whispers, hushed, guttural, and the groan of floorboards settling under unfamiliar weight. Adrenaline, cold and electric, surged. My phone, sought by instinct, offered only a dead black screen. Forgotten charger. A silent curse formed on my lips. Bat in hand, I moved, ghost-like, toward the bedroom door, every sinew drawn taut as wire. Downstairs, in the living room, sounds of intrusion, of violation, drawers pulled, objects shifted. A heavy thud made my breath catch, my thoughts scattered, desperate for purchase. Confrontation, evasion, hide, pray they remained downstairs. Before coherence could form, the stairs creaked. Ascending. Panic clawed at my throat, a physical presence I fought to subdue. Clarity now. Clarity was survival. My gaze swept the room, hunting for an egress. The window. It offered a view of the rear garden, a drop, certainly, but survivable. With agonizing slowness, I eased the sash upward. Night air, cool and damp, rushed in, a brief, clarifying shock. Poised on the brink of escape, a whisper slithered from just beyond the door. "Look in here." The brass knob began its slow, inexorable turn. No time for thought, only reaction. I propelled myself forward, swinging the bat in a desperate arc just as the door breached the frame. A sickening thwack, a choked cry, impact. I didn't linger on the aftermath, scrambling past the crumpled shape on the floor, nearly stumbling over unseen limbs. Another figure materialized at the stairwell's summit, eyes wide pools of shock in the dimness. For a heartbeat, stillness reigned. Then his hand darted toward his waistband. Metal glinted. A weapon. Denial fueled momentum. I charged, using my weight and the bat's impetus to slam into him, disrupting his draw. We became a chaotic knot of bodies, tumbling down the unforgiving stairs, punctuated by curses and the sharp report of bone on wood. Pain flared, white-hot, in my shoulder as we landed in a heap. Ignoring it, I scrabbled upright. The front door beckoned, a promise of sanctuary mere feet away. But as I lunged, a third man filled the space, blocking passage. He loomed, a monolith of muscle, easily a head taller, built like something carved from granite. "Going somewhere?" The voice was a low rumble. "Retreat." My eyes darted, frantic, seeking another path. The bat, lost somewhere in the tumble down the stairs, unarmed, outnumbered, options dwindling with each stolen breath. Then, a sliver of hope. The back door, standing slightly ajar, their entry point, my only chance. I feinted left, a clumsy, desperate move, then pivoted right, ducking beneath the huge man's grasping reach. A frustrated oath followed me as I slipped past, but I didn't dare look back. Bare feet slapped against the cold kitchen tile, propelling me toward the opening. I burst into the night, the dew-kissed grass a sudden, cool shock. The garden lay shrouded in shadow, the high perimeter fence a dark silhouette against the bruised pre-dawn sky. Behind me, shouts erupted, the sounds of pursuit crashing through the house. Instinct drove me toward the fence. It was tall, formidable, but adjacent stood an old oak I'd perpetually neglected to prune. Tonight, that negligence felt like providence. I scrambled upward, the rough bark tearing at my skin, ignoring the sting. Just as my fingers curled over the fence's top edge, a hand clamped vice-like around my ankle. I kicked back, a blind, reflexive strike, feeling the satisfying thud of contact. A grunt, and the grip slackened. No hesitation. I hurled myself over, landing heavily on the far side. Agony shot through my ankle, but I forced myself upright. Stopping wasn't an option. I was in Silas Abernathy's yard. Old Abernathy, whose perceived crankiness over my weekend music now seemed laughably trivial. His house, suddenly, was a fortress. Limping, I hammered on his back door, the sound echoing unnaturally in the quiet. "Help!" My voice was raw, ragged. "Please, somebody help me!" Interior lights blinked on. An eternity seemed to pass before Abernathy appeared, his face etched with alarm. "Elias? What in God's name?" "Please," I gasped, sucking in air. "Let me in. Men broke in. My house. After me." He pulled me inside without a word, the deadbolt sliding home with a definitive click. As his fingers fumbled for his phone, dialing emergency services, angry shouts carried from my own yard. They were still searching. The subsequent hours dissolved into a disorienting haze. Sirens wailed, cutting through the night. A brief, sharp exchange, voices raised, then the unmistakable crack of gunfire. Eventually, stillness returned. 2 were apprehended. The third, the giant, had vanished into the darkness. As the adrenaline tide receded, the chilling reality washed over me. Police questions, paramedic assessments, and finally, as the first tentative strokes of dawn painted the sky, permission to re-enter my violated home. Chaos greeted me. Drawers eviscerated, furniture fractured, possessions strewn like casualties of war. But the deepest wounds weren't visible. My perception of home, of safety, lay shattered alongside the window glass. Sleep became elusive in the following days. Every creak of the house, every unfamiliar nighttime sound jolted me awake, convinced of their return. The missing man haunted my thoughts, a hulking shadow lurking just beyond the periphery. What if he came back? Security systems were installed, windows barred, a handgun acquired, yet none of it truly mended the breach in my sense of security. The incident had struck at my foundation, revealing the terrifying fragility beneath the surface of ordinary life. Weeks bled into months. Slowly, Tentatively, I began stitching the fragments of my life back together, returned to work, reconnected with friends. But a fundamental shift had occurred. I was warier now, scanning faces in crowds, assessing potential threats. Is this one? Will they hurt me? It was an exhausting way to exist. Eventually, acknowledging the depth of the wound, I sought help. Therapy sessions became a space to unpack the fear, the anxiety. It was arduous work, but gradually the sharp edges began to soften. I started to recognize myself again. One afternoon, perhaps 6 months post-invasion, retrieving mail, I encountered Silas Abernathy. He inquired about my well-being, genuine solicitude warming his usually stern features. We talked for over an hour. I learned of his time in Vietnam, his solitary life since his wife's passing, how loneliness often wore the mask of grumpiness. An unlikely connection formed that day. Sunday coffees became routine, shared football games a welcome distraction. He imparted practical knowledge about securing my home, not as a fortress against the world, but as a space reclaimed. A year after that night, news arrived. The third man was caught. His capture concluded a violent spree across 3 states. Hearing this, a profound weight lifted, one I hadn't fully realized I carried. That evening, for the first time in 12 months, I slept with the window cracked open. The gentle night breeze, the familiar nocturnal symphony, no longer felt menacing. They were simply sounds of a world continuing, a reminder of resilience, of the possibility of reclaiming what fear steals. The break-in irrevocably altered me, undeniably. Yet, not all transformations were detrimental. Hyper-awareness coexists now with a deeper appreciation for human connection, for the quiet strength of community. Safety is no longer an assumption, but neither is fear my master. Occasionally, an unexpected noise in the deep quiet of night triggers that primal jolt of panic. But then I breathe. I remember, I am safe, I am strong, I survived, and I understand that while darkness exists, so does the light found in neighbors who unbolt their doors at 3 a.m., in unexpected friendships forged in trauma's crucible. Perhaps that is the truest lesson salvaged from the wreckage of that terrifying night. Not the omnipresence of danger, but the surprising depths of our own resilience, and the way our most harrowing trials can unexpectedly illuminate the path toward our better selves. A skeletal metal sign groaned its warning into the void. Fuel, none beyond. Pulling onto the cracked apron of the forlorn station, a tremor, deeper than the night's chill, traced my spine. This place resonated with wrongness, yet the needle quivered near zero, a stark ultimatum. Elias, that's me, chasing light and shadow with a camera, had wandered too far down this vein of asphalt emptiness. Returning from a remote assignment, I'd chosen the path less traveled, a ribbon of road spooling through landscapes forgotten by time. Stepping from the car, the silence wasn't empty. It was thick, suffocating, pressing in from all sides. No nocturnal chorus, no distant engine hum, just a vacuum where sound should be, raising the fine hairs along my arms. The station itself was a relic, stubbornly clinging to the 70s. A lone pump stood like a rusted monument on the fractured concrete. The attached store, a squat box with barred windows, glowed weakly from within. Movement flickered behind the grimy glass. A small comfort. As the pump clicked rhythmically, filling the tank, I watched them. 3 figures. Their argument was a silent film of sharp gestures, simmering aggression. One snapped his head towards the window, his gaze locking onto mine with an unnerving directness, pure venom. I looked away sharply. Tank full, reluctance warred with necessity. Pain inside felt like stepping willingly into a snare, every nerve fiber vibrating, danger. Paranoia, I chided myself, late-night fatigue. The bell above the door emitted a jarring clang as I pushed inside. Silence crashed down. 3 sets of eyes pivoted, pinning me. The air thickened, heavy with unspoken things. Evening, I managed, aiming for nonchalance. Pump 1. The figure behind the counter, his eyes clouded and ancient, gave a slow, deliberate nod, never breaking contact as his fingers tapped the register keys. When I offered the bills, I saw his hands stained a deep, unsettling umber. Engine grime, my rational mind supplied, but another, colder thought whispered, old blood. Got far to go? The question came from a hulking shape leaning nearby, a jagged white scar bisecting his cheek. No, heading back, I replied, the words tight. Maybe an hour. His eyes flickered towards his companions, a silent, chilling communication. Watch yourself out there. Roads get strange after dark. A mumbled thanks was all I could muster before retreating, almost stumbling back to the sanctuary of my car. Ignition, shift, accelerate. The station dwindling in the rear view, the men static figures in the window frame. A shiver traced its way down my spine. 5 minutes dissolved into the darkness. Then, twin stars bloomed in the mirror. Innocuous at first, but they stayed, mirroring my speed, a persistent ghost. Sweat slicked my palms against the wheel. Just another traveler, I insisted, but the cold knot in my gut tightened. The same inner voice that questioned the stained hands now screamed, "Pursuit." I bled off speed. The lights behind me dimmed in perfect synchrony. I accelerated. They surged forward, maintaining the interval. My pulse hammered against my ribs. No coincidence. This was deliberate. Straining my eyes, I tried to pierce the gloom. A hulking silhouette, dark paint swallowing the faint moonlight. A pickup? Like the one parked beside the station. Ice water flooded my veins. The next 10 minutes were a frantic ballet of desperation. I wove through speeds, feinted towards non-existent side roads, even contemplated the suicidal notion of stopping to confront them. Each time I thought the phantom lights were vanquished, they'd reappear, relentless. Panic began its insidious crawl, fraying my control. Tremors started in my hands. Cool sweat beaded on my forehead. Help was a fantasy out here. The phone displayed only mocking emptiness. No service. The road stretched on, utterly deserted. Suddenly, an engine roared, louder now. The pickup surged forward, drawn level. A fleeting glance confirmed it. The gas station truck. The driver remained a faceless shape, but the passenger, stark against the dim interior light, was the scarred man. His presence felt like a physical blow. The truck veered inwards, a deliberate, murderous shove. I wrenched the wheel, tires screaming in protest. The car fishtailing wildly as I narrowly evaded the crushing metal. My heart threatened to batter its way through my ribs. Why? What had I seen? What did they imagine I knew? Raw instinct took over. I slammed the accelerator to the floor. The aging engine screamed its protest. A high metallic whine as the needle climbed past 90, then breached the 100 mark. The world outside dissolved into streaks of light and shadow, the center line a hypnotic yellow ribbon. For a heartbeat, the truck lagged. Then its engine bellowed, closing the distance with terrifying speed. They wouldn't yield. Ahead, almost missed in the frantic scan, a dark slash indicated an unpaved turnoff. Without conscious thought, I threw the car into the turn, a violent jerk that sent us skidding sideways onto the rutted earth. Tires spat gravel. The pickup, caught by surprise, rocketed past the junction, a precious, fleeting advantage. The dirt track was brutal, shaking the car's frame, jolting my teeth. Branches clawed at the windscreen like skeletal fingers. More than once, control felt impossibly distant, yet primal fear kept my foot welded to the floor. The pursuing engine noise grew louder again, clawing its way back. Panic threatened to drown me. Focus. Just as despair began to settle, faint pinpricks of light materialized ahead, growing stronger, resolving into shapes, houses, streetlights, a town. Never had the mundane glow of civilization seemed so beautiful, so profoundly welcome. I erupted onto a paved main street, tires shrieking, scattering the few late-night onlookers. In the mirror, the pickup nosed out from the dirt track, paused under the first street light, then, inexplicably, executed a slow turn and retreated back into the darkness from which it came. I didn't dare slow down until the reassuring blue glow of the local police station sign filled my windshield. My hands shook so violently I fumbled putting the car into park. I burst through the station doors, a disheveled mess babbling my terror to the startled officer behind the duty desk. To his credit, after the initial shock, he listened intently. A statement was taken, patrols dispatched to scour the highway and investigate the isolated gas station. They found nothing. The station stood silent and derelict, choked with dust, appearing utterly deserted for years. The following weeks were haunted by phantom headlights, by shadows that seemed to coalesce into menacing figures. I rerouted my life, scanned every rearview mirror, even bought a different car. But time, the great eroder, slowly smoothed the sharpest edges of fear. Why they chased me, what dark intentions fueled their pursuit, robbery, a sadistic game, something infinitely worse, remains an unanswerable question swallowed by that desolate night. I avoid those empty highways now, religiously ensuring my fuel tank is full before embarking anywhere remote. Yet, sometimes, in the quiet dark, the phantom growl of that pursuing engine echoes in my memory, a stark reminder. The membrane between the ordinary and the terrifying is perilously thin, breached by a single wrong turn onto a forgotten road. The experience scored itself onto me. I move through the world with a heightened alertness, a deeper respect for the shadows. But fear will not be my master. That frantic energy, that desperate will to survive, I pour it now into my lens, seeking the stark beauty in lonely vistas, the light that persists even in desolation. Because life, in its entirety, the breathtaking and the blood-chilling, is precious. Occasionally, sifting through images, a forgotten shot of a roadside relic or an empty stretch of highway surfaces. For an instant, the panic surges, the sweat pricks my skin. Then, a conscious breath. I am here. I survived. And I continue, pushing forward, the ghosts in the mirror rendered into memory, not chains. My twilight circuits, weaving through the familiar labyrinth of streets, had always been a kind of sanctuary. Never did I imagine they might curdle into a source of quiet corrosion. Post-work, my ritual involved a specific loop, a pilgrimage skirting the neighborhood's edge and brushing past the skeletal remains of an old textile mill. Long defunct, it hulked in profound silence behind a perimeter of decaying fencework, its rusted signage bleeding down corrugated walls. Windows gaped like empty sockets, some shattered, others blindfolded with plywood. Life had emphatically evacuated the premises. Darkness was its sole occupant. The streetlights along this particular vein were either asthmatic flickers or entirely deceased, swallowing the pavement in shadow just paces ahead. Yet this void appealed. Fewer souls adrift, scant vehicular hum, an undisturbed space to unravel the day's knots. That stretch, once the cherished heart of my run, soured several weeks ago. One evening, the air felt different, charged. It was the first instance I recall tasting the metallic tang of not being alone. Jogging, attuned to the rhythm of my own respiration, striving for that steady cadence, my footfalls hammered a lonely tattoo on the asphalt. Usually, only the sighing wind accompanied this percussion. But that night, whispers of other steps seemed to ghost mine, faint, spectral, teasing the edge of perception. Was it merely the mind playing tricks? An undeniable prickle mapped my skin. Initially, I fought it back. An echo, surely. Perhaps the distant rumble of an unseen engine blocks away. Yet the conviction of unseen eyes intensified, a palpable weight settling between my shoulder blades. My posture stiffened, jaw locked. A dense pressure bloomed low in my gut, heavy as swallowed stone. Impulse demanded I halt. I pivoted sharply, scanning the obsidian ribbon of road. Nothing. Emptiness reigned. A few anemic streetlights blinked erratically. The mill's fence stood sentinel, unchanged. Corroded chain link crowned with barbs like a thorny wreath. No flicker of movement disturbed the pooled shadows. My heart thumped a heavier, discordant rhythm against my ribs. My breath hitched. After a suspended minute, I shook my head, emitting a short, brittle laugh at my own expense, and forced my legs back into motion. The remainder of the run passed without incident. Home, showered, a sparse meal consumed, I wrestled the unsettling memory into submission, labeling it foolishness. A couple of nights later, the familiar route beckoned. As I neared the mill once more, the sensation returned, amplified. A jolt, electric and unwelcome, shot through me the moment I turned onto the street flanking the derelict structure. The pavement here, fractured and uneven, often cradled drifts of urban detritus in its gutters. I heard the slap of my own running shoes, yes, but beneath it, impossibly, that other cadence shadowed me. It ceased whenever my pace faltered. Several times I spun around. Each time the street lay vacant, hushed and inert. My throat constricted. A chill, unrelated to the evening air, traced a path down my spine. Dampness slicked my palms. I wiped them uselessly on my shorts and surged forward, desperate to escape that particular segment of asphalt. The following day, the mill colonized my thoughts. It superimposed itself over spreadsheets, flickered behind my eyelids as I drafted emails. Was I merely cultivating my own haunting, or did some tangible strangeness reside there? That evening, I ran again, same circuit, resolved to conquer this burgeoning phantasm. But the feeling descended the instant my foot touched the block. The factory loomed to my right. Immense windows, mostly fractured or boarded, scrawled with graffiti's cryptic language, utterly lightless within. I pressed on along the sidewalk, pace quickened, eyes darting, probing the periphery. The disquiet pressed down like a physical burden. My legs felt leaden. Breath came shallow. I caught myself glancing back again and again. Still, no one. After several more nights steeped in this low-grade terror, the paranoia became exhausting. I resolved to survey the property more closely. Hoisting myself onto a concrete block adjacent to the fence, I sought a vantage point into the yard. I anticipated the usual tableau of neglect, splintered pallets, perhaps the rusted hulks of forgotten machinery. Instead, a sliver of light flared within the main building, a brief, sharp pulse as if from a handheld torch or a small lamp. The sight cinched my chest tight. No logical reason existed for illumination within that entombed place at this hour. Officially, it was abandoned. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm in my ears. "Hey!" The word leaped from me, pure reflex, devoid of strategy, fueled by adrenaline and a sudden need for confrontation. Instantly, the light vanished. Silence crashed back in, absolute. No rustle of movement, no scrape of a door. I listened, straining for footfalls on decaying floors. Nothing. Goose flesh pebbled my arms. My heart galloped. I realized my knuckles were white, aching from gripping the fence top. After a long moment, I dropped back to the sidewalk, standing indecisively. Eventually, I retreated, resuming my run, mind ablaze. If someone was inside, they'd heard me. Their silence felt deliberate, menacing. The next day, I approached Mr. Henderson, a security guard stationed a block away near a modest office building, a familiar fixture during his evening patrols. Casually, I inquired if he'd ever noticed activity around the old textile mill. He regarded me with mild puzzlement. That place, he asserted, had been sealed tight for years. No power, no personnel, nada. He recalled the owner struggling with trespassers initially, but that was ancient history, over a decade past. Now, supposedly, nobody bothered. Boards, locks, the works? He shrugged, conceding that perhaps vagrants occasionally found ingress, but he personally hadn't witnessed anything untoward. Quiet as a tomb, far as I know, he concluded. I offered thanks and departed, the knot of unease tightening within me. The mill hadn't felt quiet at all. That evening, I paused at the street's entrance, observing the structure from afar. Around 9, the air cooler now. The broken panes on the second story caught faint glimmers of moonlight, like cataracted eyes. I waited, watchful, for several minutes. Stillness, no interior lights. My stomach remained clenched. Reluctance warred with compulsion. I forced myself forward. The run began mundanely. My shoes crunched gravel. A stray cat darted across my path. The building towered beside me, monolithic, mute. Then the presence returned, an invisible pressure, eyes boring into my back. I stopped, turned, nothing but the dimly illuminated, empty street. My exhale shuddered. A tingling awareness spread through my arms, a primal readiness for fight or flight. I stood frozen for a moment, scrutinizing every shadow, every recess. Then I pushed onward, faster than intended. The factory refused to relinquish its grip on my thoughts. A few nights later, the need to understand became overwhelming. Not to break in, nothing so reckless, simply to circle the perimeter again, perhaps peer more intently through a window. I came prepared, a compact flashlight, darker attire, a conscious effort to muffle my steps. Around 10, I reached the fence. The site lay submerged in darkness, devoid of visible occupation. I searched for a weakness, a gap where the chain link might yield. Near the bottom, I discovered a section that looked deliberately cut or pried open. Crouching low, I slipped through the aperture, senses hyper-alert, praying I was unobserved. The yard exhaled dust and damp earth. Discarded crates, rusted metal rods, and defiant weeds reclaiming the cracked pavement formed a desolate landscape. Wind-stirred plastic sheeting stacked against a wall, producing a faint, dry rattle. I moved with deliberate slowness, sweeping the flashlight beam across the ground, searching for fresh footprints or tire tracks. None were apparent. My mouth felt arid. Swallowing offered no relief to the constriction in my throat. I crept closer to the main edifice. Thick planks sealed the primary doors. A smaller side entrance near what appeared to be a loading bay was secured with a heavy chain and padlock. Impasse. I found a narrow gap between boards shielding a window and peered inside. Absolute blackness met my gaze. A stale miasma drifted out. Old wood, perhaps mildew. "Hello?" I whispered, the question absurd even as I voiced it. "Anyone here?" My voice seemed unnaturally loud in the stillness, echoing slightly. Only silence answered. My heart hammered as I navigated around the building's flank, seeking another potential entry or ground-level window breach. Near a corner, I found one. A small window, its glass shattered, just large enough for observation. I angled the flashlight beam through the opening. It illuminated a chamber cluttered with dust-shrouded shelves and antiquated equipment, much of it draped in ghostly sheets or plastic. My hands trembled slightly. Vividly, I imagined a figure solidifying from the shadows into the beam's cone. Holding my breath, I listened intently. At first, only the frantic drumming in my ears filled the void. Then, a subtle sound surfaced from deeper within the factory's bowels, a faint scraping, soft, erratic, like something heavy being dragged laboriously across a floor. Its origin was indistinct, yet it sent an immediate, visceral tension through my entire frame. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. A cold sweat beaded on my forehead. I remained frozen, flashlight beam dancing through the gap, desperately seeking movement, but revealing only the same static tableau of dust and shadow. A wave of pure fear washed over me. I pictured someone lurking just beyond the light's reach, watching me, waiting. The impulse to call the police surged, but what concrete evidence did I possess beyond unsettling noises? Explaining my trespass felt equally unappealing. My pulse roared, a physical presence in my ears. Forcing myself backward, away from the window, I scanned the yard one last time. Still nothing. No lights, no footsteps, yet the factory felt undeniably occupied, pregnant with unseen presence. Retreat was the only sane option. My body felt tremulous, fragile. Worst-case scenarios reeled through my mind. Crouching again, I slid back through the fence opening, heart still battering my ribs. I moved away swiftly, hugging the shadows, avoiding the main street until necessary. Once clear, I jogged the entire distance home, constantly glancing over my shoulder, feeling utterly exposed. For the following week, I deliberately rerouted my runs, choosing brighter, more populated avenues. Yet, each night, safely home, my thoughts inevitably drifted back to the mill. Was the light on again? Was someone inside engaged in unknowable activities? Ultimately, curiosity, that persistent itch, proved stronger than fear. I returned to my original path, timing it slightly earlier, around 8 in the evening. Perhaps the lingering daylight would dispel the spectral unease. The street was deserted as ever, though not yet fully claimed by night. I ran slowly, eyes fixed on the building. No lights flickered within. No movement disturbed the yard. The familiar tension, however, remained coiled tight in my chest. Halfway down the block, a sharp clang echoed, metal striking concrete. It originated from behind the factory fence. I froze, adrenaline flooding my system. Every instinct screamed avoidance, yet an irresistible compulsion drew me back to the fence line. I peered into the yard, now bathed in the twilight's dim wash. Near the side door, the one I'd found chained, a silhouette hunched low, unmistakably human. My heart leaped. I opened my mouth to call out, but before sound could emerge, the figure straightened and slipped through that very side door. It hadn't been secured after all. The figure vanished inside, leaving the yard still once more. Rooted to the spot, I struggled to reconcile what I'd witnessed. A person, definitely. Not an animal, not a trick of the fading light. Nausea churned in my stomach. Sweat trickled down the back of my neck. After a long moment, I backed away slowly, desperate not to attract attention, unwilling to confront the mill's clandestine occupant. I broke into a run, legs heavy as stone, casting frantic glances backward until the factory receded from view. That was my final foray into investigation. Since then, I've adhered strictly to safer, brighter routes. Yet, nightly, the urge persists, a morbid curiosity to pass by, to see if the enigma offers another clue. The memory of the light, the silhouette, the unsettling sounds remains vivid. Something resides in that place, something that prefers the shroud of darkness and neglect. Unraveling its secrets is not my burden, I tell myself. I haven't alerted the authorities. A sliver of guilt remains for abandoning the mystery, yet it's overshadowed by the visceral dread that clamps down whenever I even contemplate nearing that structure. So now my runs follow different arteries through the city. More noise, more lights, more people, fewer consuming shadows. An occasional prickle of unease still surfaces, a fleeting worry about unseen watchers, but it lacks the suffocating intensity of that lonely stretch beside the old textile mill. Forgetting what I saw, what I felt, is impossible, even lacking concrete answers. Should anyone else feel drawn to probe its secrets, I hope they arrive braced for that same oppressive tension. That place is shuttered for a reason. Or perhaps it's merely derelict, co-opted by someone with their own inscrutable motives for haunting its halls. Regardless, my involvement ends here. My evening runs are meant for mental clarity, a state unattainable while shadowed by the specter of what might lurk within that abandoned edifice. Sometimes, driving past in the stark light of day, I see the mill. It appears almost benign then, just a weather-beaten husk with vacant windows and sealed doors. But night transforms it, and I know with unshakable certainty there's more concealed within its walls than meets the eye. For now, that knowledge must suffice. Proof of the supernatural or the criminal eludes me, but the presence is undeniable. My intuition screamed its warnings repeatedly. That is why I will not go near that place again. The night the presence solidified at my bed's end, any notion of a mind unraveling evaporated. 83 circuits around the sun had acquainted me with the peculiar, certainly, but the abyssal dread awaiting within Willow Creek assisted living was a territory uncharted. It was a night poised to fissure my bedrock beliefs about existence, mortality, and the gossamer membrane separating the two. My name is Arthur Pendleton. For half a decade, Willow Creek has been my designated final chapter. As these places go, it avoids outright offense. Sustenance is adequate, the caregivers possess a practiced kindness, and I've cultivated a sparse camaraderie amongst the other residents drifting towards the inevitable. Yet, an undeniable undercurrent of melancholy saturates the air, a quiet hum of waiting, of watching companions dim and flicker out. Morbid introspection has never been my inclination, however. I strive for occupation, delving into the modest library's offerings, coaxing life from the communal garden plots, unspooling tales of bygone vigor to any captive ear. But a shift occurred recently, subtle at first, objects migrating unseen across surfaces, my room's climate plummeting without cause, susurrations ghosting the corridors when solitude was certain. Initially, I blamed the accumulating years. Merely forgetfulness setting in, old fellow, I'd mutter. Yet, a deeper intuition insisted otherwise. Something was fundamentally awry. The evening it transpired, I'd sought refuge in slumber earlier than usual. My joints, besieged by arthritis, screamed a protest only sleep might potentially mute. Oblivion must have claimed me swiftly, for the subsequent awareness was a jarring intrusion, that specific primal sense of being observed. A prickle crawling the nape, the fine hairs on one's forearms achieving sudden vertical attention. That precise sensation tore me from sleep. My eyelids flew open, pinning me momentarily breathless, immobile. There, anchoring the foot of my bed, stood a form. The room swam in dimness, pierced only by the faint numerals of my bedside clock, yet its silhouette was stark, humanoid, utterly still, its focus fixed upon me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum threatening rupture. A cry lodged itself, useless in my constricted throat. All agency fled, leaving me prone, a statue of fear before the motionless watcher. Seconds distended into glacial epochs in that silent tableau. Then a languid shift. Not walking, no, a glide, frictionless and soundless, brought it curving around to my bedside. Proximity sharpened detail. It possessed an unnatural height, towering beyond any human frame I'd encountered. Its substance seemed to waver, a subtle shimmer suggesting incomplete solidity. But the face, or the utter void where one should be, ignited pure terror. A smooth, featureless expanse met my gaze. I clamped my eyes shut, a desperate prayer forming, let it vanish. But its nearness was palpable, a tangible pressure, the surrounding air leaching warmth with every infinitesimal moment. When the suspense became unbearable, I forced my eyes open. The entity now leaned over me, its blank visage mere inches distant. And then, convulsing my sanity, a mouth materialized. A dark, impossible rent split in the smoothness, yawning wider than physiology should permit. It spoke, a whisper that seemed simultaneously ambient and internal. "Arthur," it breathed, my name rendered alien, distorted by its otherworldly origin. "It is time." In that instant, some internal dam shattered. The paralysis relinquished its hold. My voice found improbable purchase. I screamed, a raw sound exceeding the capacity I imagined my aged lungs possessed, thrashing violently against the sheets. The figure recoiled, seemingly startled by the sudden eruption. It flowed backward, dissolving into the room's deeper shadows as swiftly as it had coalesced. Corridor lights flared. The hurried tattoo of footsteps approached. My door swung inward, admitting 2 night attendants, their expressions stamped with immediate concern. "Mr. Pendleton, are you all right?" one inquired, rushing to my side. Tremors racked my frame, cold perspiration slicking my nightclothes. "Someone was here," I choked out, finger trembling towards the space the entity had occupied. A thing, watching me. It spoke. The attendants exchanged that glance, the one I recognized with weary familiarity, the poor, bewildered elder assessment. One offered a gentle pat to my hand. "It's okay, Mr. Pendleton, just a bad dream. No one's here now but us." But the imprint of the encounter was absolute. This was no figment of sleep. The ensuing days blurred. Staff observed me with increased vigilance, murmuring diagnoses of sundowning and sensory disturbances. Fellow residents afforded me a wider berth, as though my affliction might prove communicable. But my conviction held firm. I was not descending into delusion. Something unearthly had occupied my room, something outside the natural order. I attempted research, seeking parallel experiences, but my arthritic fingers fumbled with the community room computer, and the library's paranormal section proved laughably thin. I was isolated in my knowledge. Nightfall became an ordeal. I'd lie rigid, awake, each floorboard creak, each flitting shadow, sending my pulse skittering. Occasionally, at the periphery of vision, a tall, shimmering distortion would flicker, only to vanish upon direct focus. A week post-visitation, I awoke near midnight to find my room suffused with an eerie, opalescent luminescence. And there, again, stationed at my bed's foot, the figure. Yet it was not solitary this time. Orbiting it were other forms, vaguely human yet translucent, radiating the same pale glow. A shock of recognition coursed through me. Former denizens of Willow Creek, faces I knew, souls who had departed. Mrs. Gable, purveyor of clandestine extra puddings, Mr. Santiago, my steadfast chess opponent, and oh, merciful heavens, was that Clara? My Clara, lost these 2 years past? The central figure lifted an arm, indicating the spectral assembly. Its voice retained that strange, displaced whisper, yet somehow the terror had lessened. "They have awaited you, Arthur," it stated. "It is time to join their company." My gaze locked with Clara's, her beloved features alight with the same tenderness that had defined our 60 years. A profound yearning pulled at me, to reach for her hand, to shed this vessel of aches and solitude. But another current, deeper, more tenacious, resisted. "No," I managed, my voice thin but resolute. "Not yet." My work here isn't finished. The figure inclined its blank head, a gesture suggesting puzzlement. The surrounding spirits flickered, their expressions tinged with sorrow. Clara blew a silent kiss before she, and then the others, dissolved into the ambient light. Only the figure remained, observing me. "You are unexpected, Arthur," it remarked. "Few elect to linger when the passage is offered." "Well," I retorted, a spark of my old defiance igniting. "I've always been a contrary old goat. You can ask anyone." To my astonishment, the figure emitted a sound akin to wind chimes caught in a rising gale. A laugh? "Very well," it conceded, "but understand, my next arrival will not present a choice." And with that pronouncement, it too vanished, plunging the room back into ordinary darkness. I lay alone, listening to the ragged rhythm of my own breathing. Morning found me infused with renewed resolve. My remaining time might be finite, but damn it all, it would resonate. I threw myself into volunteering, shared my narratives more freely. I began compiling my memoirs, determined to anchor something tangible in my wake. And each night, settling into bed, I issue a quiet challenge into the shadows. Not this day. I'm not prepared. Sometimes I fancy I hear that crystalline, stormy laughter in reply. I cannot know when the figure will reappear. Tomorrow, next month, next year. Such timelines are beyond me, but this I know with certainty. Fear no longer holds dominion. When my true summons arrives, I will be ready. I will accept its grasp and join Clara, join all those who have journeyed ahead. Until that moment, however, there is living yet to undertake, and not even the specter of death itself will hurry me along. That first encounter remains etched, a memory sharp against the blur of passing time. It was deep night, the house steeped in a silence so profound it felt like pressure. Every switch downstairs was flipped to off, save for the solitary lamp casting a weak amber halo beside the newcomer. The sapphire velvet armchair I'd claimed only the previous afternoon. A relic, it felt substantial, its Victorian bones unyielding beneath me as I sank back, seeking repose. The velvet, plush beneath my exploring fingers, whispered of age. And then, settling into its depths, it came, an abrupt glacial weight descending upon my right shoulder. It clenched, phantom fingers tightening for a breath, unmistakable as a hand yet utterly unseen. My heart gave a violent lurch against my ribs. I sprang up, breath catching, eyes darting to the seat I'd vacated. The cushion sagged distinctly on one side, holding the ghost of an impression, as if its occupant hadn't yet risen. I scrubbed at my eyes, vision swimming. Leaning closer, tentative, I watched the indentation slowly, unnervingly, smooth itself out. Fatigue, I told myself, grasping for reason, but the tremor in my legs betrayed the lie. That chair remained empty for the rest of the night. Only the day before, drawn by the perpetual curiosity sparked by its cluttered window displays, a jumble of tarnished mirrors, silent clocks, and forgotten furniture, I'd wandered into an antique shop across town. The air inside hung thick with the scent of aged wood and dust motes dancing in stray sunbeams, underscored by the low thrum of some unseen mechanism. The proprietor, a Mr. Silas Thorne with eyes like faded photographs and a neatly trimmed silver beard, offered only a cursory glance before returning to his ledgers. I navigated the narrow aisles, a labyrinth of bygone eras, until it commanded my attention. The armchair, its blue velvet, impossibly vibrant, seemed to drink the dim light. Intricate carvings, perhaps whispering tales of another century, adorned its dark wood frame. The legs stood firm. The arms offered generous repose. The price tag, though not insignificant, felt attainable. Visions bloomed. Myself nestled within its embrace, lost in books, cocooned in quiet comfort. The transaction was made. Delivery arranged for that very afternoon. When the delivery crew maneuvered it through the door, I directed them to a spot near the living room window, positioning it to face the television and a modest bookshelf. The house, a recent acquisition, still echoed with emptiness, my decorating efforts nascent. Against the bare hardwood floors and stark white walls, the armchair asserted itself, a solitary jewel of plush color and ornate form. Nothing felt amiss then. My fingers traced the smooth nap of the velvet. No blemishes, no peculiar scents, no betraying snags. Later, that first evening, before the disquiet set in, I'd attempted to read, settling into the chair for a brief spell. It felt stiff, resistant, but I chalked it up to its vintage. Rising for water, I extinguished the overhead lights, leaving only the lamp's intimate glow. I'd intended to try again, to coax my body into accepting the chair's rigid contours. It was in that moment of return, of sinking back down, that the invisible cold found my shoulder. Sleep was a fractured thing that night, punctured by sudden awakenings, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against the silence my ears strained to parse. Nothing. Just the usual nocturnal sighs of an old house settling. Imagination, I insisted, a phantom born of weariness. By morning light, I confronted the chair. It sat impassive, bathed in sunshine. I prodded the cushion, firm, resilient. I leaned my shoulder against the backrest where the pressure had been, seeking a mundane explanation, a trick of posture or upholstery. Nothing. The day unfolded with forced normalcy. Work, a solitary meal. Television watched resolutely from the distant couch. The armchair remained across the room, a silent, sapphire sentinel. The space around it felt ordinary. Yet, as twilight bled into evening, curiosity, sharp and persistent, drew me back. Again, the single lamp cast long shadows. I stood before the armchair, a silent standoff in the pooling darkness. Minutes stretched. Nothing stirred. With a sigh that felt like surrender, I committed, lowering myself onto the cushion. Instantly, the chilling weight returned, heavier this time, more definite. I froze, every muscle tensing. My gaze dropped to my shoulder. Empty air. A slight shift of my weight, and the pressure moved with me, clinging, possessive. A frantic pulse beat a tattoo in my throat. I surged upright. This time, the cushion on the left side sank. A deep, slow depression, the undeniable contour of an unseen form settling in my absence. I recoiled, damp palms wiping uselessly against my trousers. Speechless, I stared as the velvet slowly swelled back to smoothness. The chair sat vacant, mocking my terror. Retreating to the kitchen, I splashed icy water on my face, the shock doing little to quell the rising panic. This couldn't be real. Returning, fueled by defiant disbelief, I ran my hands over every inch of the chair, searching seams, probing crevices, examining the underside, testing the wooden frame for some hidden spring or bizarre mechanism. Nothing. It felt utterly normal, solid wood and fabric. Hesitantly, I tried sitting one more time. The pressure materialized almost before I settled, clamping onto my right shoulder again, now imbued with a distinct, albeit gentle, push. I scrambled up, breath coming in ragged gasps. Seizing the armrest, I shook the chair violently. It remained stubbornly inert, heavy and unyielding. Anger warred with fear, a headache blooming behind my eyes, my chest tight. I killed the lamp and fled to the dubious sanctuary of my bedroom. The ensuing days fell into a disturbing rhythm. I'd return home, studiously ignoring the armchair, circling it warily, but inevitably, drawn by a morbid need to understand, I would try to sit. Each time, the invisible chill would find my shoulder. It began as mere pressure, a static weight, but night after night, it grew subtly insistent, nudging, urging. It felt directional, as if desiring me to rise, to go somewhere, and whenever I did stand, yielding to the unnerving sensation, the cushion would linger in its depressed state for a pregnant moment, as if its unseen occupant rose reluctantly behind me. This was no figment. Unexplainable, yes, but undeniably real. My own living room became alien territory. I only approached the armchair in the full light of day, conducting futile examinations. Fingers traced every seam, eyes scanned beneath the seat, knuckles rapped against the carved wood. Nothing. Mr. Thorne hadn't mentioned any peculiarities, just an old Victorian piece, he'd murmured distractedly. Calling the shop felt absurd. What could I possibly report? An invisible cohabitant with a penchant for shoulder pressing? A week crawled by. The feeling intensified. One evening, bracing myself, I decided to resist. I sat, and the cold hand clamped down. I focused on my breathing, willing myself to remain still, to ignore the icy intrusion that made my skin crawl. The pressure mounted, becoming an uncomfortable, insistent force. My jaw ached from clenching. My heart thrashed like a trapped bird. It was unbearable. Finally, I broke, standing abruptly. But the pressure didn't vanish. Instead, it guided me, a persistent nudge against my shoulder, steering me around the armchair, propelling me toward the shadowed hallway leading to the rear of the house. I hesitated at the threshold. The pressure increased, insistent. Sweat prickled my skin, the fine hairs on my arms rising. I took a step forward. The pressure eased fractionally, a silent approval. It led me down the narrow passage. A closet door stood sentinel on one side, a linen cupboard opposite. The unseen force nudged me toward the far corner, where an old folded furniture cover rested on a small wooden stool. My phone's flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, revealing nothing extraordinary, just plaster, baseboards, dust. The moment I stopped beside that stool, the pressure on my shoulder dissolved completely. I stood there, catching my breath, my back damp against my shirt, waiting. The silence stretched, unbroken. Eventually, I returned to the living room. The armchair looked unchanged, inert. Tentatively, I touched its velvet arm. It felt like nothing more than old furniture. The following night, I resolved to cooperate fully. Dimming the house again to the solitary lamp, I sat. The cold presence settled onto my shoulder, familiar now, firm. I rose, and it began its gentle propulsion toward the hallway. I followed without resistance. It guided me back to the precise corner. This time, compelled by an instinct I didn't understand, I began tapping along the wall, listening. Solid, solid. Then, near the floor, behind the stool and its folded cover, a distinctly hollow sound answered my knuckles. Crouching, I ran my fingers over the painted baseboard. It looked seamless, yet as I pressed near the corner, a small section of the wood paneling gave slightly. Working my fingertips into the hairline crack, I eased it outward. A small, cleverly concealed door swung open, revealing a dark cavity within the wall. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the stillness. My mouth was desert dry. Reaching into the hidden space, my fingers closed around a small, cool metal box. It was tarnished, aged, secured by a simple latch that yielded with a faint click. Inside, nestled on faded linen, lay a small bundle of letters tied with a brittle ribbon. Reading them there in the dim hallway felt impossible. My hands trembled too violently. I carried the box back to the living room, placing it carefully on the coffee table. Then, bracing myself, I sat in the armchair and waited. Nothing. For the first time since that initial encounter, no icy weight settled upon me. I glanced down. The cushion remained perfectly even beneath my weight. I sat for 10 minutes, breathing deliberately, eyes fixed on the rusted box. The air felt lighter, clean. The oppressive tension had lifted. My body finally began to unclench. Eventually, I rose and switched on the main overhead light, flooding the room with uncompromising brightness. I opened the first letter. The script was archaic, lupin, penned in faded ink. Dates confirmed its antiquity, aligning roughly with the chair's presumed era. The words spoke of the house, of renovations undertaken long ago, of belongings tucked away for safekeeping. Names appeared, unfamiliar ghosts from a forgotten time. They were mostly brief notes, receipts, mundane records of domestic life, nothing overtly valuable or sinister. No mention of spirits or spectral hands, just the prosaic remnants of a life lived within these walls, perhaps secreted away by a previous owner and lost to time. I closed the tarnished lid and set the box aside. Over the subsequent nights, I tested the armchair cautiously. The expectation of that cold touch lingered, a phantom limb of fear. But it never returned. The cushion never dipped mysteriously. The chair felt ordinary. Its sapphire velvet glowed richly in the lamplight. Its carved frame stood solid and silent. The strangeness had evaporated, though a residual unease sometimes whispered through the house after dark. The armchair itself held no more menace. I even replicated the conditions, sitting late at night, only the single lamp burning. Still nothing. Gradually, the knot of anxiety within me loosened. The metal box found a home in a seldom-used drawer, its contents unexamined further. My focus shifted back to making the house my own. A new coffee table arrived, art began to populate the walls, warmer bulbs softened the light. The armchair transitioned into its intended role, my reading nook. Evenings found me settled there, newspaper rustling, magazine pages turning. The velvet remained soft. The frame still emitted the occasional geriatric creak when I shifted, comforting sounds of age, not haunting. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I'd ponder the origin of that invisible hand, the insistent pressure. It seemed undeniable that it, whatever it was, had wanted the hidden compartment found. Its task completed, its message delivered via the recovered box, the presence had simply ceased. I never spoke of it, guarding the secret against the inevitable disbelief. Life flowed back into its normal channels. The nights grew quiet again. I slept undisturbed. My heart no longer leaped at shadows in the living room. Floorboards settled without sounding like footsteps. A sense of calm reclaimed the space. Who left the box and why remained unanswered questions, drifting like dust motes in the quiet air. The letters, vague and time-worn, offered no definitive story. Pursuing it felt like trespassing on sorrows or secrets long laid to rest. I let it be. Now, my gaze rests on the armchair and I see elegant lines, deep blue velvet, intricate woodwork, a handsome piece ground in the room. I feel a comfortable embrace, a solid presence beneath me. No cold dread touches my shoulder. No sinking cushions betray unseen company. No spectral force guides my steps through my own home. I sit, rest my arms, and breathe in the quiet. The house feels settled. Explanations seem unnecessary. The absence is explanation enough. The presence is gone. The armchair is just an armchair, and that is peace. "4 hours adrift on asphalt rivers, and the pressure that had begun as a whisper behind Elias's eyes now screamed, a tightening iron band around his skull. Salvation, or so he prayed, lay coiled within a plastic bottle nestled in the glove compartment. A prescription penned months prior, a lifeline untouched until this desperate night. All that stood between him and relief was a pharmacy. Any pharmacy. Then, a flicker against the encroaching twilight. A small structure hunched by the roadside, crowned with the emerald glow of a pharmacy cross, a sickly beacon in the gloom. Faded gold script above the entrance whispered, "Harrow's Apothecary." The building sagged with age, paint peeling like sunburnt skin, yet the open sign pulsed weakly, a hesitant invitation. A breath, almost a sob, escaped Elias. Pushing through the door triggered a hesitant chime from a tarnished bell overhead. The air inside was thick, cloying, the sharp tang of disinfectant warring with an underlying metallic bitterness, like old blood. Fluorescent tubes hummed a dissonant tune, bathing dust-laden shelves crammed with elixirs and forgotten remedies in a jaundiced light. Presiding over this dim domain, behind a scarred wooden counter, stood a figure draped in a stark white coat. Wisps of silvered hair clung precariously to a scalp stretched taut over bone. He didn't acknowledge Elias's entrance, his attention utterly consumed by notations scratched into a vast, leather-bound ledger, a relic from another era, his pen moving with unnerving, clockwork regularity. "Excuse me," Elias ventured, his voice sounding unnaturally loud, swallowed by the stillness. "I need this prescription filled." He proffered the slip of paper. The man looked up. Elias felt an involuntary urge to recoil. His eyes, pale and flat as river stones, seemed devoid of light, blinking with unsettling infrequency. "Certainly." The voice emerged, thin and dry as autumn leaves. He accepted the paper, the brief brush of his fingers against Elias's skin, sending a jolt of unnatural coldness through him. Elias watched, a knot tightening in his gut, as the pharmacist studied the script, lips forming silent words. Then, the strange ritual. He lifted the paper to his face, inhaling its essence with a slow, deliberate breath. "Remain here," he instructed, turning his back, his voice unchanged. "I possess something more suitable." "More suitable?" Elias echoed, the pounding in his head intensifying. "No, thank you. Just what the doctor ordered, please." The pharmacist paid him no mind, already moving along the shadowed shelves, plucking vials, his movements accompanied by a low, continuous murmur. The discordant clink of glass, the rhythmic grind of mortar and pestle, the sibilant whispers. It all blurred into a disorienting soundscape beneath the fluorescent hum. When he pivoted back, he held a small, unlabeled vial containing tablets of an unnerving, luminous blue. "These," he stated, sliding the vial across the worn counter, "will address your affliction more profoundly." Elias stared at the vial, the alien blue pills pulsing faintly. "This isn't right," he managed. "There must be some error. I need the medication specified on the script." A smile flickered across the pharmacist's lips, a mere muscular twitch that never reached those chilling eyes. "No error. These are precisely what you require. My experience is extensive. I really must insist on what my doctor prescribed," Elias said, striving for a firmness his trembling limbs betrayed. The pharmacist's expression calcified. "They are functionally identical," he asserted, a sharp edge honing his previously monotone voice. "A superior formulation, perhaps. Likely more economical." Elias reached for his prescription, still lying vulnerable on the counter. "I believe I'll seek another establishment." Faster than seemed possible, the man's hand snaked out, clamping around Elias's wrist. The grip was glacial, unyielding, possessing a strength that belied his frail appearance. "You will accept what I provide," he hissed, the words low and menacing. Elias yanked, but the icy manacles held fast. "Let go of me," his voice quavered. "Now." The pharmacist leaned closer, pushing the vial of blue pills nearer with his free hand. "These tablets," he repeated, almost crooning, "are your remedy. I understand your needs far better than any physician." "You're hurting me!" Elias gasped, twisting fruitlessly. "Release me, or I'm calling the authorities." The smile returned, wider this time, grotesque, a rictus learned by rote, devoid of warmth or humanity. "No one will answer your call," he murmured. "Not out here, not at this hour." Elias's gaze darted around the silent apothecary. The windows were black mirrors now, reflecting the sickly light. How much time had bled away? The buzzing fluorescence seemed to dim, deepening the shadows that clawed at the room's edges. "Just take the pills," the pharmacist urged, his tone shifting to a near-gentle persuasion that was somehow more terrifying. "Compliance makes everything simpler." With his free hand, Elias fumbled for the reassuring weight of his phone in his pocket. The pharmacist registered the movement instantly, lunging across the counter, reaching for Elias's other arm. In that split second of shifted weight, Elias wrenched his imprisoned wrist free with a surge of adrenaline, stumbling backward towards the exit. "You are making a grave error," the pharmacist called, his voice regaining its sharp edge. He emerged from behind the counter, the vial of blue pills still clutched in his hand. "Those prescribed remedies are inadequate now. Only mine hold efficacy." Elias scrambled backward, eyes locked on the advancing figure, groping blindly for the door handle. "Do not depart," the pharmacist pleaded, almost plaintively. "You require these. You will comprehend this soon." His fingers closed around cold metal. He pulled. Nothing. Panic seized him, a cold fist closing around his heart. Locked? He shoved, desperation lending strength, and the door swung outward with a groan. He stumbled into the night air, the cool dampness a shocking balm. He scrambled into his car, keys rattling against the ignition. As the engine roared to life and he sped away, the rearview mirror captured a final, chilling tableau. The gaunt pharmacist standing sentinel in the apothecary doorway, bathed in the sickly light, the vial of blue pills held aloft like a malevolent offering. The iron band around his skull still pulsed, a brutal rhythm against his temples, but it was a distant concern now. Miles down the highway, in the sterile brightness of a chain drugstore bustling with late-night shoppers, Elias finally filled his legitimate prescription. The relief was profound, yet incomplete. Later, cocooned in the safety of his own home, curiosity mingled with residual fear prompted him to search online for Harrow's apothecary. He found nothing. No digital footprint, no reviews, no address pinpointed on any map. It was as if the sagging building, the chilling pharmacist, and the luminous blue pills had never existed outside his own frantic experience. Sometimes, when the familiar pressure begins its insidious creep behind his eyes, Elias remembers. He pictures the unlabeled vial, the unsettling blue glow. He wonders about the nature of those pills, about other travelers waylaid by pain on desolate roads. How many accepted Mr. Harrow's more suitable remedy? What became of them? Now, Elias plans meticulously, ensuring prescriptions are filled well before any journey, and should necessity ever demand a stop at an unfamiliar small-town pharmacy, he first scans the interior. If the lights buzz too low, if the shelves seem too dusty, if a lone figure with vacant eyes and unnaturally cold hands stands waiting behind the counter, Elias keeps driving. No headache, however agonizing, is worth discovering the truth behind those pale blue pills. The cathode ray flickered, painting the security office in ghostly light as the corridor feed stuttered into view. An empty passage, bleached by the jaundiced luminescence of overhead fluorescence. I pressed closer, my reflection a faint ghost on the glass, eyes probing the monitor's manufactured twilight. Then, a flicker within the flicker, a silhouette, swift as thought, devoured by the edge of the frame. Gone. My pulse kicked, a frantic drum against the cage of my ribs. This monolith was supposed to be my tomb tonight. Mine alone. Leo Vance. That's the name stitched on the uniform. 6 months I'd haunted the night shift at Omnicorp Tower, this colossus of smoked glass and sterile ambition thrusting skyward from the city's frayed edge. Mostly, the hours were a slow bleed, a battle waged against drooping eyelids. Not tonight. Tonight, the building breathed differently. Something dissonant hummed beneath the usual silence. I cycled through the camera eyes, a digital voyeur searching the tower's vacant veins. Ground floor, immaculate, still, stairwells, concrete canyons untouched. Then the penthouse feed, the domain of the executives, shimmered into focus. And there it was again, a distinct form, weaving through the skeletal landscape of cubicles, fluid and deliberate, hugging the shadows. Protocol screamed, "Phone the authorities." Yet a different current pulled me. Call it morbid fascination, call it a gut-feeling whispering of depths beyond mere burglary. Whatever the name, my hand bypassed the phone, reaching instead for the plastic keycard, the passkey to the upper echelons. The elevator's ascent was glacial, each floor number illuminating with agonizing slowness. My mind became a frantic projection room. Trespasser, vengeful ex-employee, something stranger still, a soft ping, amplified tenfold by the profound quiet, announced my arrival as the doors sighed open. I stepped onto the plush carpet, my flashlight's beam slicing the opulent dark. Acres of polished wood and chrome unfolded before me, a labyrinth of partitioned spaces housing ergonomic thrones and sleeping computer monoliths. I moved with a predator's caution, ears straining against the low thrum of dormant technology, the louder thudding of my own heart. Silence held sway for a moment, thick as velvet. Then, drifting from my left, the distinct rhythmic clatter of fingers on a keyboard. Stealthily, I rounded a partition sculpted from frosted glass. Froze. Illuminated by the cool azure glow of a monitor sat a woman, vaguely familiar from the digital directories. Anya Sharma, a name tethered to senior software engineering. "Miss Sharma?" My voice, intended to be firm, emerged thin, unsteady. She spun, chair wheels whispering on the carpet. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the screen's light. Stark terror warring with, was that culpability? "Who are you?" she challenged, her hand instinctively moving to shield the laptop. I advanced, angling the flashlight to catch the security insignia on my chest. Leo Vance, Night Security. It's exceptionally late. What brings you here? Anya's posture sagged. A momentary collapse before resolve snapped her upright again, her gaze hardening. "I'm excavating the truth," she stated, her voice low, charged. "And now that you're standing here, you're implicated. You need to see." Bewildered, cautious, I edged closer. She turned the laptop back, revealing cascading lines of code, an alien language to my eyes. "Omnicorp isn't selling what they claim," she murmured, urgency threading her tone. "This software, it's far beyond business analytics. It's surveillance, on a scale never before conceived." A crease formed between my brows. Meaning? Anya inhaled sharply, the sound brittle in the stillness. It cross-references everything: social feeds, CCTV networks, financial trails, private messages, real-time tracking of anyone, anywhere. Governments are buying it, shadow corporations, anyone with the capital to own a life. The weight of her words landed like a physical blow. If this was genuine, it was seismic. The kind of revelation that shatters empires, corporate or political. Why involve me? My throat felt scraped raw. Her eyes locked with mine. Fear still swam there, but beneath it, a bedrock of fierce determination. Because I have the proof, but I can't extract it alone. If they find me, the unspoken consequence hung heavy in the air. We both understood the corporate playbook for inconvenient truths. Every rational instinct screamed retreat. Clock out, forget, disappear back into the anonymity of the night shift. But her gaze held me. The raw desperation, the unyielding conviction. I heard myself nod. What do you need? The next hour dissolved into a blur of whispered explanations. Secret server stacks entombed in the sub-basement, encrypted communications buried within mundane corporate emails, labyrinthine offshore accounts washing illicit profits clean. The deeper we plunged, the more the sterile office transformed into a battleground of digital espionage and high-stakes conspiracy. This wasn't the boredom I was paid to endure. This was a thriller unfolding in real time, the threat sharp and immediate. Lost in the data streams, we almost didn't register it. The soft chime of the elevator arriving on our floor. Anya's head jerked up, her face instantly bloodless. They know, she breathed. No need to ask who they were. With frantic haste, we killed the screen, melting behind a bank of cubicles. Peeking over the partition, I saw them. 2 men, sharp suits failing to conceal the hard lines of ordnance beneath the fabric. They stepped out, radiating cold purpose. We have to move, I whispered, urgency clawing at my throat. Anya nodded, her knuckles white around a small flash drive, the distilled essence of her dangerous discovery. We began a creeping retreat towards the emergency stairwell at the far end of the vast floor. Their footsteps echoed, methodical, hunting. Anya, we know you're still here, one voice called out, smooth, devoid of emotion. Don't make this difficult. There's no scenario where you walk away clean. In the gloom, Anya's hand found mine, a desperate, trembling grip. We make it, she whispered, her voice surprisingly firm. This has to get out. Almost there. Then, disaster. My foot caught a waste bin, sending it skittering across the polished floor with a clatter that ripped through the silence like a gunshot. There! A shout. Heavy footfalls pounded towards us. Run! I shoved Anya towards the stairwell door. We crashed through it, plunging down the concrete steps, taking them in reckless 2s and 3s. Behind us, the pursuit echoed, their polished shoes ringing on the metal treads. My brain scrambled for options. The lobby was suicide. They'd have it locked down. But maybe... This way, I gasped, yanking Anya through a fire door on the 3rd floor. Memory flared. A fire escape tucked away, leading to the service alley. We sprinted through another darkened office landscape, the pursuers' shouts closer now. There, the window latched tight. My fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled with the mechanism. Just as the office door behind us slammed open, the window gave way with a groan. "Go! Go!" I practically threw Anya through the opening, scrambling after her, pulling the window shut. The iron rungs of the fire escape protested under our weight, groaning into the night air. Above, curses erupted as they realized our route. A sharp crack split the night. A bullet ricocheted off the railing inches from my head, spitting sparks. We hit the asphalt running, Anya clutching the drive as if it were her own heart. Behind us, the ominous clang of footsteps descending the fire escape spurred us on. "My car, this way," Anya gasped, pulling me around the building's corner. Seconds later, we were inside, engine roaring, tires squealing as we tore away from Omnicorp Tower, the city lights smearing into frantic streaks around us. As the adrenaline tide began to recede, the cold reality washed in. We were fugitives, marked, carrying information powerful entities would commit murder to suppress. "Now what?" I asked, the words rough in my throat. Anya's gaze was fixed forward, knuckles bone white on the steering wheel. "We leak it. I know someone, a journalist, if we can just reach them." I nodded, the unspoken dangers hanging between us. This wasn't an ending. It wasn't even the beginning of the end. But it was a chance, a sliver of possibility to drag the truth kicking and screaming into the light. Driving into the encroaching dawn, leaving the city and its towering secrets behind, the magnitude of the night's transformation settled over me. Hours ago, I was just Leo Vance, guardian of empty spaces. Now, a reluctant conspirator in a story that could rewrite headlines, topple giants. The future was a vast unknown, a terrifying expanse where success was uncertain and failure potentially fatal. Yet, one thing was starkly clear. The old life was gone, incinerated in the crucible of the last few hours. As the first tentative rays of sunlight painted the horizon, a silent promise formed within me. Whatever lay ahead, whatever the cost, we would see this through. The truth demanded its errand. If fate had thrust us into the roles of its unwilling messengers, then so be it. The night shift at Omnicorp was definitively over. Our real work, fraught with peril and uncertainty, was only just beginning. The cough of the engine dissolving into silence was absolute. A final sigh of mechanics, and the car drifted onto the gravelly verge, a metal carcass resigned to the dust. Out here, where the map bled into unmarked territory, the truth settled heavy as the twilight. I was adrift, leagues from anywhere resembling civilization, tethered to a defunct machine with the sky empty of signal bars. This vehicular failure, I would soon learn, was merely the overture to a far darker symphony. My name is Silas. What follows is not a tale easily told, nor easily believed. The metamorphosis of a mundane drive into a desperate scramble against an evil woven into the very fabric of this forgotten land. The journey itself began with simple intent. My sister's nuptials beckoned, and these winding backcountry arteries promised a quicker passage. The landscape, unfurled in vistas of sun-drenched hills, deep stands of timber whispering secrets, and lonely farmsteads punctuating the green like scattered teeth. Yet, as the sun bled towards the horizon, painting the road in strokes of elongated shadow, the rustic charm curdled, replaced by a stillness that felt less like peace and more like anticipation. Hours had dissolved under the hypnotic drone of tires on asphalt when the car first faltered. A warning light blinked insistently on the dash, a frantic pulse preceding the shudder, the lurch, the final surrender. Hood popped. I confronted the engine's labyrinthine guts, a tangle of hoses and wires as inscrutable as ancient runes. Mechanical aptitude had never been my forte. Defeated, I reached for my phone, already knowing the outcome. Nothing. The ether offered no connection. Help, it seemed, would require legwork. Far down the ribbon of road, a solitary luminescence pricked the deepening gloom, a dwelling perhaps half a mile distant. Not ideal, certainly, but the sole prospect for a working telephone or directions to the nearest hamlet. The walk commenced under a sky bruised with evening. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. No chirp of crickets, no call of nocturnal birds, only the rhythmic crunch of my own boots on the gravel and the sound of my breath, unnaturally loud in the vacuum. The farmhouse materialized slowly from the dusk. Weathered clapboard siding, the weary slump of a porch roof. Light spilled from within, illuminating an old pickup parked sentinel-like out front. Someone was home. I mounted the porch steps, mentally composing my appeal for aid. But before my knuckles could meet the wood, voices drifted through the door. Strained, urgent whispers that arrested my movement. "We cannot sustain this," a woman's voice pleaded, taut with frayed nerves. "Discovery is inevitable." "Ain't nobody finding out," a man's rough baritone countered. "We're careful, always." "But the risk..." Her words were clipped short as my foot inadvertently nudged an empty tin can, sending it rattling across the porch boards. Inside, the voices ceased abruptly. I froze, breath caught in my throat, the sudden stark realization dawning. I had stumbled upon something private, something potentially perilous. The door creaked open. Framed in the doorway stood a man, tall and broad, his face a landscape etched by time and hardship, his eyes chips of cold flint. He surveyed me, head to toe, his expression a mask. "Something you need?" he inquired, the tone implying he hoped the answer was no. I forced moisture into my dry mouth, summoning the most harmless smile I could manage. "Deeply sorry to impose," I began, "but my car's given up the ghost, maybe half a mile back. I was hoping, could I possibly use your telephone to call for a tow?" He held my gaze for a protracted moment, then flicked a glance over his shoulder towards the unseen interior. When his eyes returned to mine, a subtle shift, a flicker of something unsettling, glinted within them. "Sure thing," he said, his voice suddenly, unnervingly affable. "Can't abide leaving folks stranded. Come on in." Every nerve ending shrieked a warning, a primal urge to turn and flee into the indifferent darkness. But logic, or perhaps desperation, dictated otherwise. I needed assistance. This was the only door offering it. I stepped across the threshold, the floorboards groaning a mournful protest beneath my weight. The house's interior was dim, cluttered, the air thick with a peculiar odor, cloyingly sweet, yet underscored by a faint, unmistakable note of rot. A woman materialized in the kitchen doorway, nervously wiping her hands on a faded dishcloth. Her smile was a tight, brittle thing that never reached her eyes. "Phone's through here," the man indicated, gesturing me towards the kitchen. As I passed the woman, I saw the whiteness of her knuckles clenched around the rag. Her gaze met mine fleetingly, and in that instant, I glimpsed an emotion starkly resembling terror. The kitchen was cavernous, dominated by a hulking, old-fashioned wood stove. My attention, however, snagged on a door set into one wall, a cellar door, thick, heavily reinforced, and secured with multiple bolts on the outside. An anomaly that sent a fresh wave of unease through me. The man pointed to a relic of a rotary phone mounted on the wall. "There she is. Got the number for your tow?" I didn't, but the operator was my fallback. Lifting the heavy receiver, I became acutely aware of the man positioning himself subtly between me and the front door, the only visible exit. The woman lingered in the kitchen doorway, her eyes darting nervously between me, the man, and that heavily bolted cellar door. I dialed 0, a silent prayer accompanying the turn of the dial. The response was not a dial tone nor a ring, but a flat, dead finality. The line was severed. "Trouble?" the man asked, his voice laced with a false, placid curiosity. Slowly, deliberately, I replaced the receiver. My thoughts scrambled for purchase. Yes, line seems to be out." He nodded, a pantomime of unsurprised resignation. "Happens. Storms knock 'em out." But the night was placid, utterly devoid of wind or rain. "Look," I said, striving to keep the tremor from my voice. "I truly appreciate the offer, but perhaps I should just head back to the road, try walking towards the nearest town, find a service station." His expression solidified, the thin veneer of hospitality cracking. "Wouldn't recommend that," he stated flatly. "Gets dangerous out here after dark. Best you stay put. We got a spare room. Come morning, I'll run you into town myself." It wasn't an offer, it was a decree, underscored by his physical presence blocking the way. Leaving was clearly not sanctioned. "That's exceptionally kind," I stammered, mind racing for an escape route, any plausible excuse. But I really must press on. My sister's wedding is tomorrow, and I can't possibly... My words were brutally interrupted by a sound that turned my blood to ice, a choked, muffled scream erupting from beneath the floorboards, from the cellar. The woman gasped, a small, involuntary sound quickly swallowed. The man's face contorted, darkening into a thunderous mask. "Now, see what you done," he snarled, all pretense of civility incinerated. "You gone and woke our guest." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, awful certainty. Escape this house now, or be consumed by it forever. I feinted left, then lunged right, a desperate bid to dart past him. He moved with startling speed. A hand like forged iron clamped onto my arm, halting me with brutal efficiency before he slammed me against the wall, the impact rattling my teeth. "Cora!" he barked at the woman. "Fetch the rope." I thrashed, kicked, fought with the ferocity of cornered prey, but his strength was overwhelming. Within moments, he had me subdued, pinned face down on the grimy linoleum floor. "Shoulda kept driving," he muttered, yanking my wrists behind my back, the rough cord biting into my skin. "Don't fret none. You'll be meeting our other company right soon." As he began to haul me towards the cellar door, my gaze locked with Cora's. Tears tracked through the grime on her cheeks, but her body remained inert, statue-like. Whatever horrors resided below, she was long past resisting them. One by one, the bolts slid back with grating clicks. The heavy door swung inward, releasing a putrid exhalation from the Stygian depths, a miasma of stale blood, filth, and utter despair. As he dragged me down the crude wooden steps into the swallowing blackness, I squeezed my eyes shut, convinced I was descending into hell's antechamber. Time lost meaning in that subterranean prison. Days bled into an indistinguishable morass, punctuated only by the arrival of new terrified faces and the silent removal of others. The atrocities witnessed, the suffering endured, language falters in attempting to convey them. Yet, amidst the degradation, the flicker of defiance never died. I watched, I waited, I searched for the slightest fissure in their grim routine. Then, one day, chaos provided an opening. A newly captured soul, fighting with desperate fury, managed to wound Jeb. In the ensuing pandemonium, a sliver of opportunity appeared. The specifics of my egress are a brutal, messy affair best left shrouded, but suffice it to say, freedom was clawed, not granted. I emerged. Now, recounting this ordeal, I anticipate disbelief. The narrative strains credulity, sounds like the fever dream of a broken mind. But I swear to you, its horror is absolute truth. That farmhouse still squats on its forgotten plot, nestled deep in the anonymous countryside. Jeb and Cora still reside there, their peculiar predatory hospitality eternally extended to the lost and the luckless. So, should you ever find yourself stalled on some desolate stretch of road as darkness falls, exercise profound caution in seeking refuge. You cannot know what inferno you might inadvertently approach, and once invited across the threshold, escape might demand a price beyond reckoning. A whisper of mechanics, sharp, unnatural, sliced through the 3 in the morning's dead stillness. My hand, poised over the light switch, froze mid-air. Solitude should have been absolute in this apartment, my sanctuary. Yet, turning slow as ice forming on water, I faced the living room's abyss. And there it pulsed. A single crimson eye staring unblinking from the gloom. Recording, watching. A certainty, cold and heavy, settled in my gut. This vigil was not new. They call me Eliza. This place, the Viridian Lofts, was meant to be an arrival, the culmination of scrimped savings and yearning. 3 months prior, I'd stood breathless before its cathedral ceilings and walls of weathered brick, a factory reborn as urban aspiration. Miss Albright, the agent, had sung praises of its integrated intelligence, lights that anticipated needs, climate tuned to whim, security seamless and absolute. Perfection, I'd thought, seduced by the gloss. Initial weeks unfolded in a haze of contentment, sunlight striping the vast floors, a sense of anchorage finally mine. Then the subtle dissonances began. A lamp left blazing, though I distinctly remembered extinguishing it. The ambient temperature inexplicably climbing degrees I hadn't dictated. Waken once, disoriented, to the television murmuring infomercials I'd never selected. New home jitters, I rationalized. Forgetfulness. But the explanations wore thin, replaced by a prickling awareness, a persistent ghost touch at the edge of vision. A flicker glimpsed, vanishing upon focus. The sensation of unseen scrutiny. Until the night the mechanism clicked, sharp and definitive in the pre-dawn quiet. Paralyzed, I stared at that lone, malevolent red spark. How long had it nested there in the shadows of my own living room? What other intrusions lay concealed? A tremor started in my hands as I flooded the room with light. Then the hunt began. An hour yielded a sickening harvest. 3 more insidious lenses. One perched above the bedroom doorframe. Another tucked behind the bathroom mirror. A third nestled amongst the kitchen spices. Miniatures of violation expertly camouflaged. Invisible unless sought with the frantic desperation now consuming me. Who would do this? And for what purpose? My fingers hovered over my phone, instinct screaming for the authorities. But a colder logic intervened. What if the network was wider? What if the Guardians were compromised? No, this required calculation. I couldn't remain under those unwavering electronic gazes, yet revealing my discovery felt like suicide. Feigning normalcy became an act of sheer will. I stuffed essentials into an overnight bag, clothes, toiletries, my laptop. My call to Chloe was a masterpiece of forced nonchalance. Just need a break, you know? A different view. Praying the tremor in my voice didn't betray the terror coiling within. As I waited for the elevator, the faces of my neighbors swam into sharp focus. The Hartwigs across the hall, their roomy eyes fixed. Julian next door, his usual easy smile replaced by something watchful, appraising. Had their scrutiny always been this intense? Days blurred at Chloe's, each shadow a potential observer, every random sound a trigger. Sleep offered little refuge. Online, I plunged into the dark web of surveillance tech, stalking horrors, hidden signals. Each article amplified the dread. Scattered reports surfaced. Other city dwellers plagued by inexplicable glitches, whispers in empty rooms, the unshakable feeling of being watched. Dismissed as paranoia, I knew better. Armed with the borrowed signal detector, justified to a tech-savvy colleague with a flimsy story about a suspicious ex, I returned to the Viridian. The air inside my apartment wasn't just stale, it hummed. The detector shrieked, a frantic digital pulse mapping not just cameras but microphones embedded deep. And the signals weren't confined to my unit. They saturated the building. My heart hammered against my ribs as I traced the electronic trail down flights of stairs into the building's echoing underbelly. It led to an unremarkable steel door, stenciled, utility access, restricted. But the detector pulsed strongest here, painting a vibrant picture of concentrated transmission. This was the nerve center. Prudence screamed retreat, call someone, anyone. Yet, an insatiable curiosity, sharpened by days of fear, propelled me forward. Recent, frantic hours spent absorbing lockpicking tutorials online paid off. The tumblers yielded with a soft click. Beyond the door lay not dusty pipes, but the cold glow of a technological web. Banks of monitors lined the walls, each screen a window into a private life. My neighbors, caught in mundane moments, utterly unaware. My own apartment, stark and vacant on one display, but it stretched further. Glimpses of office cubicles, bustling cafes, shadowed park benches across the metropolis. A city laid bare. A soft scuff on the concrete behind me. I spun around. Julian stood silhouetted in the doorway, not with surprise, but with an unnerving air of expectation. "We wondered when you'd piece it together, Eliza." His voice, usually warm, now held a chilling flatness. "You possess a keener perception than most. It's why you were selected." Selected? The word caught in my throat. For what? A smile touched his lips, devoid of warmth. "For membership, naturally. The Sentinels. You've passed the initiation." As he spoke, others emerged from the shadows behind him, forming a silent semicircle. Familiar faces distorted by this new context. The Hartwigs, Ms. Albright, Marcus the barista from down the street. Their collective gaze pinned me. "What is this?" I managed, striving for a firmness I didn't feel. "Some kind of twisted club?" Julian chuckled, a dry, unsettling sound. "Oh, Eliza, think grander. We observe, we document, we understand. And now, so will you. Welcome to the Sentinels." My reality fractured. This clandestine theater, these watchers, it defied sanity. Yet the glowing screens, portals into countless unguarded lives, were irrefutable. "And if I decline?" I asked, the question tasting like ash. Julian's smile iced over. "Refusal isn't on the table, Eliza. You've seen behind the curtain. You comprehend the scope. One is either part of the apparatus or, well, let's just say obstructions are efficiently removed." The walls felt closer, the air thinner, cornered. Yet, shamefully, a sliver of morbid fascination pierced the fear. The sheer scale of it, the omniscient perspective, it held a dark magnetism. What will be required of me? The question escaped my lips, alien and terrifying. A subtle easing rippled through the assembled sentinels. "For the moment, simply resume your existence," Julian instructed smoothly. "Maintain appearances. We will contact you with your initial contribution shortly." Emerging from the basement felt like surfacing from a deep dive. The ordinary world now saturated with hidden meaning. My life irrevocably altered. I had stumbled into the heart of an invisible empire, and now, somehow, I belonged to it. The subsequent weeks passed in a state of fractured awareness. I performed the rituals of my life, acutely conscious of the unseen eyes, but now, my own gaze had sharpened. I started noticing the subtle placements, a lens glinting atop a traffic light, the unnervingly static posture of certain individuals in crowded squares. Then came the envelope, slipped silently beneath my door. Inside, a name, an address, schematics for planting a micro camera within a private residence. My hands trembled, holding the tangible proof of my complicity. The weight of it settled, cold and immense. I stood at a precipice, embrace this hidden world, become a gear in its ceaseless machine, or resist, risk annihilation to expose them. As I commit these words to the page, the choice remains unmade, hovering like a judgment. But this much is undeniable. The surface of reality is thin, fragile. Beneath it, a network of observation hums relentlessly. The world is wired, its secrets harvested by unseen watchers. Once glimpsed, This hidden layer cannot be unseen. Blissful ignorance is a luxury forever lost. So, should you ever feel the prickle of unseen eyes upon your back, dismiss it not as mere fancy. In this meticulously documented age, perhaps paranoia is simply clarity.